Recall that the Doctrine and Covenants certified that the inspired Constitution was structured according to just and holy principles. What are some of these just and holy principles? We will now discuss a few of them. Within the Constitution are listed several of the rights of individuals guaranteed by government. Many of these have already been discussed at length. All of these rights were understood by the framers of the Constitution to come from God, and not the government. The government was merely there to ensure that these rights were protected. The first 10 amendments of the Constitution are known as the Bill of Rights, and they list some of the most basic, unalienable rights of man. The Bill of Rights includes the sacred and unquestionable rights to freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition to government for redress of grievances. The sacred and unquestionable right to keep and bear arms. This right guarantees not only the right to own firearms, but also to carry them on your person for your personal protection. The sacred and unquestionable right to the sanctity of the home being protected against the forceful quartering of military troops. The sacred and unquestionable right to be secure in one's own person, home, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Warrants must be issued on probable cause. A person must receive an indictment in order to answer for a criminal accusation. No person can be tried for the same offense more than once. No person can be compelled to testify against themselves. No person can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. An individual's private property cannot be taken for public use without just compensation to the owner. The sacred and unquestionable rights of accused persons, which are the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, as well as the right to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to know who their accusers are, and to cross-examine them, and to compel witnesses to testify in their favor. The right to trial by jury, as would be the case in criminal trials, in civil suits of sufficient monetary controversy. The people retain rights not enumerated in the Constitution, and the powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states or to the people. The purpose of this presentation is not to take sides in partisan politics. However, it is needful for us to discuss a fundamental misunderstanding regarding the nature of rights. President Franklin D. Roosevelt was without a doubt among the most collectivist of the American presidents in the 20th century. One of the most frightening political innovations of President Roosevelt was near the end of his life and presidency, when during his 1944 State of the Union address he attempted to introduce a second Bill of Rights to American law, which included the right to a useful and remunerative job, the right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation, the right of every family to a decent home, the right to adequate medical care, the right to adequate protection from the economic fears of old age, sickness, accident, and unemployment, and the right to a good education. This list of things sounds so benign and even just that many may wonder what could be so sinister about such a proposal to guarantee these things by force. The problems with trying to guarantee these things are, they are not unalienable rights, but are privileges that should only be merited through hard work. A person has no unalienable right to require the services or property of another against their will, because it infringes on the freedom of those thereby required to provide the service or property. The real Bill of Rights listed in the Constitution are limits on the power of government. thereby making the individual free of government's control. This erroneous Second Bill of Rights is a list of newly granted powers to the government that would cause it to encroach into the lives of people and increase its power far beyond constitutional limits. The only way for government to attempt to actually secure such privileges would be to have an authoritarian communist-style regime, and, even if that were the case, like in Soviet Russia, in the end, the government would be unable to provide these promised privileges anyway. Such a Second Bill of Rights would necessitate total government and would completely destroy freedom and prosperity. Ezra Taft Benson wisely warned us against the false idea that it's government's role to make sure that everyone lives comfortably and prosperously, regardless of individual effort. He said, "Material gain and economic security simply cannot be guaranteed by any government. They are the result and reward of hard work and industrious production. Why then do Americans bake more bread, manufacture more shoes, and assemble more TV sets than Russians do? They do so precisely because our government does not guarantee these things. If it did, there would be so many accompanying taxes, controls, and regulations and political manipulations that the productive genius that is America's would soon be reduced to the floundering level of waste and inefficiency now found behind the Iron Curtain. And I've seen it with my own eyes in several countries." Within the Constitution, rather than giving government a great abundance of power, as one might expect, is often instead many limitations on what government may do. In fact, the Constitution is marked more for its limitations on what government is allowed to exercise authority in than for its granting of authority to government. The reason for this is that the founders understood that government with too much power would usurp authority that does not properly belong to it. Limited government, therefore, is the basic underpinning of the founders' idea of government. Elder Dallin H. Oaks said, "This principle of limited national powers, with all residuary powers reserved to the people or to the state and local governments, which are most responsive to the people, is one of the great fundamentals of the United States Constitution. In my lifetime, I have seen much neglect of this fundamental constitutional principle." Regarding the relationship between limited government and freedom, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "Free government is founded in jealousy and not in confidence. It is jealousy and not confidence which prescribes limited constitutions to bind down those whom we are obliged to trust with power. That our Constitution has accordingly fixed the limits to which, and no farther, our confidence may go. In questions of power, then, let no more be said of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution." The few things that the government was allowed to do are called the enumerated powers, because they are carefully numbered. The enumerated powers are found in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Regarding these enumerated powers, distinguished author W. Cleon Skousen has written, "The powers delegated to the national government were highly important but carefully enumerated. The Constitution lists only 20. These are powers related to foreign affairs, war, peace, national security, managing interstate commerce, federal taxes, naturalization, citizenship, patents, bankruptcy laws, federal lands and property, handling federal finance, coining of money, fixing weights and measures, establishing post offices, setting up federal courts, and handling crimes on the high seas or violations of the law of nations. The founders knew that the federal government officials would try to invade or control the activities assigned to the states. They therefore included the 10th Amendment to remind the federal government that it had no authority in any area not specifically described in the Constitution." Note that one of the enumerated powers of the federal government is the power to tax. but that the tax revenues may only be used to perform the rest of the enumerated powers. Government cannot do whatever they decide they want to do with our tax money. They are bound within this very important list of duties.